What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected voices walks onto a talk show stage only to be met with accusations, disrespect, and a complete disregard for basic courtesy? In less than a minute, Sunny Hostin would ignite a confrontation that left Morgan Freeman an icon whose career spans decades doing something no one had ever seen him do. Walking off a live television set, the lights were bright that morning in the View studio. Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the panel, flanked by Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Sunny Hostin. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Morgan Freeman entered to thunderous applause, his calm presence filling the room, his gentle smile warming the crowd. He took his seat across from the panel, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. Whoopi led with the usual soft questions, his latest projects, his thoughts on the industry, the kind of easy rapport designed to put a guest at ease. Morgan responded with grace, speaking thoughtfully about storytelling, the responsibility of artists, and the next generation of actors he admired. The audience hung on every word. Morgan Freeman at his finest. Wise, eloquent, and utterly genuine. Then Sunny leaned forward, her tone shifting. "I want to shift gears," she said, eyes locked on him. "I want to ask something I think the audience needs to hear from you directly." Morgan nodded politely. "You've been in this industry for decades, and you've benefited tremendously from it," Sunny continued. "But do you feel any responsibility for the fact that your generation, your peers essentially gatekept opportunities from women and people of color for years?" The studio went silent. You could feel the temperature drop. The other panelists exchanged quick glances. Sarah Haynes's eyes widened. Joy Behar tilted her head, uncertain. Even Whoopi, normally unflappable, seemed taken aback. Morgan paused, taking a measured breath. "The industry has certainly evolved," he began carefully. "Yes, there were systemic issues many of us have tried to address. But I wouldn't characterize my career, my generation, in such broad strokes. Many of us fought to open doors, to create opportunities where there were none. Did you fight hard enough?" Sunny shot back instantly. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you and your contemporaries were comfortably collecting paychecks while the rest of us fought tooth and nail, just to get a seat at the table." The audience fell silent. This wasn't a conversation, it was an ambush. Morgan remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. "That is an unfair characterization," he said evenly. "I have spent my career trying to do work that matters. Work that represents people authentically, that challenges stereotypes rather than reinforces them. Have you, though?" Sunny pressed, leaning in. "Because I've watched a lot of your films, and I see a lot of Morgan Freeman playing the wise mentor, the magical helper character who exists to make the white protagonist feel good about themselves. Isn't that just another form of gatekeeping? Playing it safe to stay employed?" Joy Behar interjected, sensing the tension spiraling. The audience shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some staring wide-eyed at the unfolding scene. Morgan Freeman's expression remained steady, but the calm that defined him seemed to be cracking just slightly. "But noticeably, Sunny, I think Morgan has had an incredible career, so much range." "Shawshank Redemption. For one, I'm not talking about Shawshank," Sunny interrupted, eyes fixed on Morgan, ignoring Joy entirely. "I'm talking about a pattern. I'm talking about choices. And I think you owe this audience honesty about whether you prioritized your own comfort over real change." Morgan leaned back slightly, jaw tightening ever so subtly, a controlled flicker of tension. "Miss Host," he said, the formality slicing through the charged air, "I have never prioritized comfort. I have taken roles that challenged me, scared me, pushed boundaries. I've worked with directors and writers of every background. I've mentored young actors, funded scholarships, used my platform to speak on issues that matter. So I would appreciate it if you did not reduce my entire life's work to some kind of self-serving calculation." The audience murmured, a ripple of applause starting to build, but Sunny cut through it. "See, this is the problem," she said, voice rising. "The minute someone asks you to examine your privilege, you get defensive. You make it about yourself. You cannot even have an honest conversation about the harm that was done. What harm did I do?" Morgan asked, voice measured but firm, an edge creeping in. "Now tell me specifically as harm did I personally do to you or to anyone else?" "It's not about you personally," Sunny said, exasperated. "It's about the system, complicity, about having power and not using it as you should have. How do you know what I did or didn't do?" Morgan leaned forward, eyes locked on her. "How do you know what conversations I had behind closed doors? What projects I fought for? What battles I chose? You sit here with assumptions, accusations. You don't know my life, my choices, or my struggles." Whoopi moved to intervene. "Okay, let's all know," Whoopi Morgan said, hand raised, gaze never leaving Sunny. "Let her speak. She clearly has something to say, so say it. Get it out." Sunny didn't hesitate. "Fine. You represent a generation of actors who were grateful just to be in the room. And in that gratitude, you forgot to kick the door open for those behind you. You played roles that made white audiences comfortable instead of challenging them. And now, when people like me ask you to reckon with that, you hide behind your accolades instead of taking accountability." The studio went silent. Sarah Haynes slumped slightly in her chair. Alyssa Farah Griffin stared down at her note card, frozen. Joy Behar opened her mouth, then shut it again. Unsure, Morgan Freeman stood. Not abruptly. Not theatrically, slowly, deliberately, with the quiet authority of a man who had endured enough. "I came here today as a courtesy," he said, voice calm but resonant. "To talk about my work, to connect with people who might appreciate it, to have a conversation. But I will not sit here and be disrespected. I will not be lectured by someone who has decided, without knowing me, that I am the enemy. You want to talk about privilege?" Morgan's voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "You are sitting here on a national television show, being paid to share your opinions. And you are using that platform to tear down someone who has spent 50 years trying to do good work. That is your privilege, Miss Host, and I want no part of it." He turned to Whoopi, eyes steady, voice softening. "Whoopi, you are a friend, and I respect you enormously. But I cannot stay here. Morgan, please let us just," Whoopi began, rising from her chair. "No," he said gently, but with absolute firmness. "I am not going to give her the satisfaction of continuing this. I am not going to let this turn into a spectacle." He swept his gaze across the audience. Wide eyes, hands over mouths. Shock and disbelief rippling through the studio. "Thank you all for having me," he said, voice warm again. "I hope you continue to enjoy stories that move you, challenge you, and bring you together. That is all I have ever tried to do." And then he walked. Not stormed, not fled. Walked with his head held high. Shoulders squared a very inch, the man whose voice has narrated the human experience itself. The camera stayed on him as he crossed the stage. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain silent. They did a little of both scattered claps mingling with stunned quiet. Sunny Host sat frozen in her chair, mouth slightly open, completely unprepared for this outcome. Joy Behar leaned over, whispering something, but Sunny didn't respond. Sarah Haynes rested her hand on her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked to Whoopi, waiting for some direction. Whoopi, ever professional, turned back to the cameras. "We are going to take a quick break," she said, voice tight. "We'll be right back." But the damage was done. As the show cut to commercial, the panelists sat in strained, comfortable silence. "I was just asking legitimate questions," Sunny finally said. Defensive? You ambushed him, Joy said flatly. That was not an interview. That was a prosecution. He could have answered the questions, Sunny shot back, her voice sharp. He chose to walk off because you gave him no choice. Sarah said softly but firmly. You weren't listening to him. You were just waiting for your next chance to attack. I was holding him accountable, Sunny insisted. No, Whoopi interjected, her voice carrying the weight of authority. You were grandstanding. There is a difference. Alyssa finally spoke, cautious but steady. I think we need to address this when we come back. The audience deserves an explanation. When the show returned from commercial, there was no apology. No acknowledgement beyond Whoopi's clipped words. As you saw, our guest, Morgan Freeman, decided to leave. We respect his decision and will move on to our next segment. Move on they did, but the audience had not. Social media had not. The world had not. What viewers had witnessed was more than a walk-off. It was a moment of clarity. A man who had spent decades embodying professionalism and grace, asserting that certain lines are simply not to be crossed. Morgan Freeman did not owe Sunny Hostin an explanation of his career. He did not owe her a defense of every choice in a lifetime of work that began long before she was born. He did not owe her the performance of contrition she seemed to expect. What he offered instead was far more valuable, a lesson in dignity. He showed that you do not have to engage with bad faith. You do not have to tolerate disrespect in the name of dialogue. You do not have to sit silently while someone wields a microphone as a weapon. The conversation Sunny tried to have might have been worth having under different circumstances, with respect, curiosity, and genuine engagement. Instead, she created a courtroom where she was judge, jury, and executioner, and expected Morgan Freeman to accept the verdict. He refused. In that refusal, he reminded everyone watching what self-respect looks like, what boundaries look like, what it means to hold your dignity as non-negotiable. Sunny Hostin aimed to make a point, to confront a legend, to appear fearless and uncompromising. Instead, she revealed the difference between criticism and cruelty, between accountability and ambush, between someone seeking answers and someone needing to be right. Morgan Freeman walked off that stage, taking the moral high ground with him. He carried the respect of millions of viewers, thinking, good for him. He carried the certainty that he had not compromised himself, degraded himself, or played along with a setup designed to humiliate him. Behind him, the panelists sat frozen, trying to regain composure, trying to continue the show. But the look on their faces said it all. Joy knew it had gone too far. Sarah knew it had gone too far. Even Alyssa, the newest member, knew it had gone too far. The silence lingered, heavier than any applause. A stark reminder that dignity cannot be manufactured, coerced, or taken. It must be respected. Only Sunny seemed unable or unwilling to see it. She sat there, defensive and self-justifying, convinced she had done nothing wrong, convinced that asking tough questions absolved her of responsibility, convinced that Morgan Freeman was the one who couldn't handle it. But the audience knew better. They had seen the truth unfold in real time. They had watched a woman with a platform use it not to enlighten or educate, but to attack. They had watched her mistake aggression for courage, confrontation for conversation. They had watched her treat a guest, a human being, as an avatar for every frustration she harbored with an entire industry, an entire generation, an entire system. And they had watched that guest, that human being, decide he deserved better. Because he did. A segment meant to last 15 minutes ended in less than 10. A conversation meant to showcase Sunny's fearlessness instead revealed her inability to distinguish between holding power accountable and wielding power carelessly. Morgan Freeman had been interviewed thousands of times. He had faced tough questions, challenging moments, and difficult conversations. He had navigated an industry that was not built for him, that tried to limit him at every turn. And he had done it all with grace. But grace does not mean submission. Grace does not mean allowing yourself to be mistreated. Grace does not mean sitting silently while someone who has already decided you are guilty demands that you prove your innocence. Grace, as Morgan Freeman showed that day, can also mean knowing when to walk away. The audience understood it. Viewers at home understood it. Even some of the panelists understood it. Sunny, however, sat frozen, the only one who had not yet grasped the lesson. She had wanted a moment. She got one, but not the one she intended. She had hoped to be remembered as the one who held Morgan Freeman accountable. Instead, she would be remembered as the one who disrespected him so thoroughly that he had no choice but to leave. Morgan Freeman had walked onto that stage as a respected actor. He walked off as something more, a man who reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own diminishment. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult anyone. He did not make a scene. He stood, spoke his truth, and left. And in doing so, he won. Not because he got the last word. Not because he made Sunny look bad. But because he refused to let anyone, no matter their platform position or perceived righteousness, treat him as anything less than he is. A man of integrity. A man of principle. A man who knows his worth. No talk show host, no matter how convinced of their moral authority, could take that away from him. This is what happens when respect is demanded, but not given. When questions become accusations. When conversation becomes confrontation. When a guest appearance is mistaken for target practice. All it took was 39 seconds of one careless, disrespectful comment. And someone who had spent a lifetime earning respect decided they would not spend another second being disrespected. And they walked away just like Morgan Freeman.